In Beverly Hills, secrets don't whisper. They glitter. They laugh. They sip champagne from crystal glasses and smile as if forever can be bought. But beneath the marble floors and diamond necklaces, danger waits. It waits in the silence between lovers' words. It waits in the glass of wine raised to trembling lips. It waits in the heart of a woman too young to care, and in the pride of a man too old to see. Henry Prescott thought he was beginning a new life. Margaret Prescott knew he was ending the one that mattered. And Isabella Voss, she wasn't here to love. She was here to finish what she started. The question isn't who betrayed whom. The question is, who survives? Henry stood in the center of the living room, his voice rising with every word. Margaret, I can't do this anymore. The sound of his fury echoed against the high ceilings. This wasn't a discussion. This was a declaration. His arm thrust forward, finger jabbing at the woman who had stood beside him for over 2 decades. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes, soft once, now weary with years of compromise, searched his face for mercy. Henry, she whispered, almost pleading, after everything we've been through, you're just walking away? Henry scoffed, pacing across the polished floor. Don't twist this into something noble. I've given you everything. A mansion, wealth, the best life a woman could ask for. But I want more. I need more. His voice cracked, betraying eagerness under the anger. Don't I deserve that? Margaret's fingers clutched the pearls at her throat, the same pearls he'd given her on their 10th anniversary. They had been a promise of forever. Now, they felt like a choke chain. Her voice trembled, but the hurt in it was sharp. More or younger? Tell me the truth, Henry. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Henry's eyes darted away for a moment, then returned with a cruel honesty. There's someone else, Margaret. The words sliced the air in two. A single chandelier crystal trembled loose, crashing onto the marble with a sharp ping, as though even the house recoiled. Margaret staggered back. Her hand rose to cover her mouth, her tears spilling before she could stop them. Someone else? After the children we raised? After the scandals we survived? After I forgave you when no one else would? Her voice broke, but inside the fracture lived fury. Henry straightened his suit, feigning composure. His hands shook, but his eyes gleamed with something wild, like a man chasing youth. She's younger, Margaret. She makes me feel alive again. The word stung worse than the confession. Alive? As if Margaret, his wife of 25 years, had been death itself. Her knees weakened, but she forced herself upright. Pride alone held her steady. Alive? Or reckless? You're 60, Henry. How old is she? The pause before his answer was deliberate, cruel. When the number finally came, 23, it struck like a verdict. Margaret gasped, as if the ground beneath her shifted. The necklace snapped, pearls scattering across the floor like the fragments of her life, rolling into corners, impossible to gather again. For a moment, the room was nothing but silence. Not even Henry moved. Then Margaret's tears hardened into something sharper. She straightened, her shoulders squared like a queen dethroned but unbroken. 23, she repeated, each syllable a dagger. Henry, that's not love. That's your fear of the mirror. That's your war with time. And you will lose. But Henry only smirked, mistaking her dignity for surrender. I'm filing for divorce. I need a fresh start. Nothing you say can stop me. Margaret turned away, staring at the floor where her pearls lay shattered. Her lips curved into a bitter smile through her tears. A fresh start. Be careful, Henry. Fresh things rot the quickest. The air grew heavy with her warning. Henry tried to harden himself against it, but her words lingered, clinging to him like smoke. For the first time that evening, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. Yet he buried it quickly, pulling his phone from his pocket, scrolling to the photo of the girl who had bewitched him. Margaret's eyes caught the glow of the screen. She didn't need to see the picture to know. She could already imagine her, flawless skin, hungry eyes, the kind of smile that came not from love, but from conquest. Henry, she said softly, voice dripping with prophecy, you think she'll save you from age. but men who chase shadows end up swallowed by them. Henry turned sharply, angered by the sting of truth. Enough, Margaret. This is my life. You'll see. I'll be happier than I've ever been. Margaret held his gaze, her own eyes glistening with both grief and steel. No, Henry. You'll be fooled. And when the truth comes, it will be too late. The pearls glimmered on the floor, like tiny stars scattered across marble, symbols of a love that once was, and the warning of what was to come. As Henry stormed upstairs, Margaret remained frozen in place, her tears now dry, her heart heavy but resolute. She knew she couldn't stop him. Not yet. But she could wait, and she would be watching. Beverly Hills has always been a city of illusions. Mansions rise like castles, cars glide like jewels on wheels, and parties burn through the night with laughter that hides more secrets than confessions. For Henry Prescott, it was the perfect place to bury one life and begin another. Her name was Isabella Voss. She was 23, a model with beauty so sharp it cut through conversation. Her skin flawless, her hair like dark silk, her smile promising pleasures Henry had long convinced himself were gone with his youth. When she entered a room, heads turned as if pulled by invisible strings. And Henry, he wasn't just enchanted, he was enslaved. The first night he appeared with her, Beverly Hills buzzed. The Chateau Marmont, alive with camera flashes, caught them walking hand in hand. A man of 60, gray around the edges, beside a woman young enough to be his daughter. People whispered, some laughed, but Henry didn't hear any of it. Isabella's laugh drowned them all out. She clung to his arm, leaned into him as though he was the only man that existed, and Henry believed it. He wanted to believe it. At the table, Isabella's eyes glistened like polished onyx as she leaned close. "You're not like the others," she whispered, her fingers grazing his hand with practiced delicacy. "You see me." The words made Henry's heart pound, but her eyes weren't on his heart. They flicked toward his cufflinks, the Rolex at his wrist, the wine list he didn't even read before ordering the most expensive bottle. He thought he saw love. What she saw was power. Margaret, however, saw the truth before anyone else. Alone in the house she once ruled, she sat surrounded by silence that was louder than any party. The broken strand of pearls she had worn for decades now lay scattered in a crystal bowl, each bead glistening like a tiny ghost of promises broken. She knew this story. She had heard it whispered through friends, through neighbors, men blinded by vanity, consumed by women who smiled too perfectly, too deliberately. And Margaret knew her husband's weakness better than anyone. Henry was not in love. He was terrified, terrified of time, terrified of age, terrified of becoming invisible. And Isabella was the perfect illusion to silence those fears. But illusions have teeth. Within weeks, Henry was unrecognizable. His graying hair suddenly dyed, his tailored suits trimmed slimmer, his gym schedule doubled. He stopped talking about his business empire and started talking about photo shoots, fashion weeks, and parties that ran until dawn. He was obsessed, addicted, and the more he gave of himself, the more Isabella took. His children confronted him. "Dad, this isn't you," they warned. But Henry waved them off with a laugh too loud, too careless. "You're just jealous I've found happiness again." Happiness. That was what he called it. But Margaret, watching from the shadows of her solitude, called it by its real name, danger. One evening, Isabella lifted a glass of wine toward him. The ruby liquid shimmered under the glow of Beverly Hills lights. "To fresh starts," she said with that honeyed smile, her eyes locked on his. Henry, eager to prove his devotion, clinked his glass against hers and drank deeply. He never noticed how her lips barely brushed her own glass. Margaret's warning rang in the air like a prophecy. Fresh things, they rot the quickest. Later that night, Isabella traced her nails along the rim of his empty glass, her voice dripping with softness. "Do you trust me, Henry?" He laughed, foolishly, like a man too blind to see the knife above his head. "Of course I do. But trust is not always a gift. Sometimes, it's the lock on the door of your own prison." Behind Isabella's dazzling smile lay shadows no spotlight could banish. She played her part well. Kisses on his cheek in public, sweet words whispered in private. But her heart was cold, her intentions colder. Henry thought he was her savior. In truth, he was her prey. Nights bled into days, and Henry's obsession grew deeper. He started talking about making Isabella his wife, about rewriting his will to ensure she was cared for. To him, it was romance. To her, it was victory. One night, as Henry slept beside her, Isabella slipped from the bed. Her steps were soft, her movements rehearsed. She lifted her phone and spoke in a voice no one at the parties ever heard. Sharp, cold, businesslike. "It's working," she said. "He's obsessed. He trusts me completely. Just make sure I have more of the powder." The words hung in the dark like poison itself. Meanwhile, Margaret lay awake in her own room across town. In her hand, she held a photograph from their wedding day. Henry, young and strong, had once looked at her the way he now looked at Isabella. Tears welled in her eyes, but behind them burned something stronger, determination. "God," she whispered into the night, "don't let him die blind." Henry, oblivious, sank deeper into Isabella's spell. He believed he had discovered love again, when in truth he was stumbling into his own undoing. Every glass of wine, every whispered promise, every night spent in her arms was another step toward the edge of a cliff he could not see. But Margaret could see it. She felt it in her bones. And though Henry had cast her aside, though he had humiliated her with betrayal, she knew one thing. She could not let the man she once loved be destroyed, not by time, and not by Isabella Voss. Trust. That was the word Henry clung to, even as his world began to tremble beneath him. He trusted Isabella's smile, her whispers, her warmth at night. But what he called love was nothing more than surrender, and every surrender carries a price. The first sign came quietly, a dizzy spell at a dinner party. One moment Henry was raising his glass, boasting about his new ventures. The next, his hand slipped, his vision blurred, and his words tangled into silence. Guests rushed to help, but Isabella laughed it off, her hand tightening around his shoulder. "Too much wine," she said sweetly, guiding him away. Henry nodded, embarrassed, never questioning. But Margaret questioned. When she heard about his collapse from a mutual friend, her stomach tightened. She knew Henry, his limits, his strength. This was not wine. This was something darker. Back in her quiet home, Margaret began to dig. Old contacts, whispers in Beverly Hills, fragments of gossip stitched together. And every thread led back to the same truth. Isabella Voss was no angel. Rumors of men she had dated, fortunes that had crumbled, inheritances that vanished after her sudden departures. Nothing concrete, never enough to accuse her. But patterns don't lie. Meanwhile, Henry's health began to falter. His energy, once fueled by Isabella's attention, started to drain. Headaches, nausea, sudden fatigue. Isabella brushed it off as stress. She pressed another glass of wine into his hands, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "You need to relax, darling. Trust me." And he did. He drank what she gave him, blind to the danger, each sip pulling him deeper into her plan. But shadows always leave traces. One night, Margaret followed instinct. She drove past a rooftop bar where Isabella and Henry were dining. From her car, she watched. Isabella leaned close, too close, her hand sliding something into Henry's glass with the ease of a woman who had rehearsed it 100 times. Margaret's breath caught. She wasn't imagining this anymore. The truth was unfolding before her eyes. Henry laughed, oblivious, sipping from the glass as though drinking his own destruction. Margaret gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. For a moment, anger surged. Let him suffer, she thought. Let him reap what he sowed. But then another thought came, stronger, undeniable. He may have betrayed me, but he is still the father of my children, still the man I once loved. And I will not let him die at the hands of a girl who knows nothing of loyalty, nothing of sacrifice. From that moment, Margaret's grief transformed into purpose. She began to watch Isabella more closely. She noticed the late-night phone calls, the way Isabella never finished her own drink, the strange powder she carried in her purse. Margaret followed her to a discreet meeting one evening. An unmarked car, a man handing her a small package. Margaret stayed hidden, her heart pounding, but she saw enough. The truth was undeniable. Isabella was poisoning Henry. But how to save him? Confronting Henry would be useless. He was blinded by desire, deaf to reason. Telling the police, without evidence, it would only backfire. Margaret knew she needed proof, something undeniable, something Henry himself could not ignore. The chance came one evening in Henry's own home. Isabella, in her usual glamour, poured 2 glasses of wine. Margaret, hidden in the shadows of the hallway, slipped closer. Her eyes caught the subtle movement. Isabella sprinkling something fine and white into Henry's glass, her smile unwavering as she carried it to him. Margaret's breath caught. This was it. This was the evidence. But how to act? She couldn't burst in. Not yet. She needed to be smarter than Isabella, subtler. And so she waited, watching Henry lift the poisoned glass to his lips. Her heart thudded in her chest. God, give me strength. But just before he drank, Isabella's phone buzzed. She set the glass down, annoyed, and stepped away to answer the call. Margaret seized her chance. She rushed forward, her hands trembling, but steady enough to switch the glasses. Henry returned to his drink, lifting it without hesitation, swallowing every drop. For the first time, the poison never touched him. Instead, it waited in Isabella's untouched glass. When Isabella returned, she picked up her own drink, her smile effortless. But as she sipped, Margaret's eyes blazed with silent triumph from the shadows. Isabella coughed once, then laughed it off. But the bitterness in her throat was undeniable. She glanced at Henry, panic flickering in her gaze, and quickly set her glass down. Margaret slipped away unseen, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She hadn't exposed Isabella yet, but she had proved to herself what she already knew. Isabella's beauty hid fangs. The question now was no longer whether Henry was in danger. The question was whether Margaret could save him before it was too late. Beverly Hills is a city of masks. The houses wear them, the parties wear them, and so do the people who live inside. But masks can only last so long, and when they fall, the truth is never gentle. Henry Prescott had built his life on illusions. Money, status, youth. But now, he was weaker than ever. The dizzy spells came more often. His skin paled, his weight slipped away. Yet he still clung to Isabella, blind to the storm gathering around him. She stayed by his side, always smiling, always whispering comfort. But Margaret knew better. She had watched Isabella slip poison into his glass, had seen her collect secret packages in the night. Margaret's warning rang louder with each day. Fresh things, they were at the quickest. The breaking point came on a night Henry thought was meant to celebrate love. Isabella had planned a dinner, private, intimate, candlelight flickering across crystal glasses. Henry, though frail, was eager. He had something to announce. As he sat across from Isabella, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I've updated my will," he said, his voice trembling but proud. "Isabella, everything I have, it will be yours." Her eyes widened, not with love, but with triumph. She leaned across the table, pressing a kiss to his cheek. "You don't know how much this means to me," she whispered. But Margaret, listening from outside the door, knew exactly what it meant. Moments later, Isabella lifted her glass. Inside, Henry's drink shimmered with the fine powder she had slipped in just before dinner. Her smile was perfect, her voice soft as velvet. "To forever," she said. Henry raised his glass. But before the rim touched his lips, the door burst open. Margaret stood there, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Don't drink it, Henry." His hand froze, confusion flickering across his face. Isabella's eyes darkened, her mask cracking for the first time. "Margaret," she hissed, "what are you doing here?" Margaret stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Saving him," From you. Henry looked between them, his hand trembling. Margaret, stop. You're jealous, bitter. Jealous. Margaret's laugh was sharp, bitter. No, Henry. I'm not jealous. I am horrified. She's poisoning you. I've seen it with my own eyes. Isabella shot up from her seat, fury replacing charm. She's lying, she cried. You can't believe her. But Henry's gaze shifted back to the glass in his hand. For the first time, doubt clouded his blind devotion. Margaret's words, her warnings, her prophecy, they all came rushing back. Margaret moved quickly, snatching the glass from his hand. Without hesitation, she tossed the contents in the fireplace. The flames hissed and sputtered, smoke curling black into the air. Henry stared, stunned. Isabella paled. Why would she stop you? Margaret said quietly. If it wasn't true. The silence that followed was heavy. And then Isabella broke it, not with denial, but with rage. You fool, she screamed, her voice venomous now, stripped of sweetness. Do you think I ever loved you? You were a wallet with legs. A desperate old man clinging to a dream he couldn't buy. And you, her fingers stabbed the air toward Margaret. You ruined everything. Henry staggered back, the truth hitting harder than the poison ever could. His knees buckled, and for a moment he looked 10 years older. Margaret rushed to his side, her arms steadying him. I told you, Henry. Fresh things rot. And she was always rotten. Isabella's mask shattered completely. She lunged for her purse, pulling out a small vial, the source of her power. But Margaret was faster. With one sharp motion, she slapped it from Isabella's hand. The vial shattered on the marble floor, powder scattering like ash. For the first time, Henry saw Isabella not as a savior, but as a predator. And he saw Margaret, not as the wife he had discarded, but as the shield he had never deserved. Isabella's fury turned to desperation. You'll regret this, she spat. But before she could move again, the sound of sirens pierced the night. Margaret had already called the police. When the officers stormed in, Isabella's fight crumbled. She was dragged away, her beauty useless against cold steel handcuffs. Henry collapsed into a chair, his face pale, his hands trembling. He looked at Margaret, shame and gratitude battling in his eyes. Why, Margaret? He whispered. After everything I did to you, why save me? Margaret's voice was soft but steady. Because once you were mine. Because you are the father of my children. And because no matter how deep betrayal cuts, I refuse to let love end in poison. The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Henry lowered his head, tears glistening in his eyes, not just for the poison he had nearly swallowed, but for the love he had nearly destroyed. The mansion that once felt cold now carried a different weight, the weight of truth, of survival, of betrayal uncovered.